Even this late in August, players are still going way higher than they should be going, and we're going to actually rank the top 10 most overdrafted players in 2025 fantasy football today. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So we're actually going to start right at the bottom here, and in this bottom tier, you're going to see that Mr. Joe Burrow is the first name I want to talk about. He's at number 10. So with Joe Burrow, the thing about him you have to understand is that I love Joe Burrow. I love Joe Burrow because I know he is an elite quarterback who, when you look at last year's numbers, he can absolutely put up those types of numbers all over again. It is not lost on me that Joe Burrow can give you another 40-plus touchdown season with more than 45 or 4,600 passing yards. But there's a lot of things that could go wrong here at his current price, which is at 33.9 on ESPN and 41.1 on Yahoo. Where that puts him is a fourth round value. Basically the equivalent of trying to get a Jalen Hurts, right? Jalen Hurts is a much better floor quarterback than Joe Burrow is because of his rushing upside. There's a lot of things that could go wrong here with Burrow. He could get hurt because the offensive line is still bad. And you'll notice that I put the sack number there as well because it's still 100% relevant. He had 48 sacks last year because his offensive line stinks. And it stinks again. So I think that there's way more threat to him getting hurt than there is for a Jalen Hurts, for example, who is, yes, a run-first quarterback, but also has a dominant offensive line. And I also think that Joe Burrow is in a situation as well where his pass catchers, one or the other, have gotten hurt in the past. Now, I'm not as concerned about those two guys, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, missing extended time, but I am very worried about the potential of him missing some significant time. And I just think that if you want to draft Joe Burrow, because I understand wanting to draft an elite quarterback, especially if you have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, you're kind of obligated to get that stack. But I think the place that you should be doing that at is Underdog. Because if we look over at Underdog's price on him, you're getting him at a 6th round value. That is way more comfortable than getting him 2 rounds before. Even in the early 3rd round is where you could get him in ESPN leagues. It's just way too early. You look at that Underdog price and you see a much better value. And speaking of Underdog, if you do want to get in and draft Joe Burrow at a way better price, stack him with Jamar Chase, stack him with T. Higgins, you could go down there in the comments and they're offering something pretty awesome right now. All you have to do is play $5 and you will get $50 back. So you can get into Best Ball Mania, for example, play that $25 draft, and they will give you $50 back, plus an additional deposit match of 50% up to $1,000. I won $19,000 playing Underdog Best Ball last year, so you should give yourself a shot. There's a link down there. You can use code FFR to sign up, and they will give you that sweet deal. Now, at number 9 in the same tier, I do need to talk about Davante Adams, and this is going to hurt a lot of people because I have probably not been as transparent about my distrust of Davante as I should have been. I've been more torn about Davante longer than you know. And there's one specific reason why. Because on the one hand, I love Davante Adams. He's one of my favorite receivers of the last decade. This guy is an elite route runner in his prime. And even last year, we didn't really see any signs of slowing down necessarily. More just a sign of, turbulence of his season. But there is history out there that I've been covering for years now that does not suit him. So what I've done over the last 11 seasons at this point was I wanted to look at the wide receivers who went on top 12 consecutive runs as a fantasy wide receiver. And basically I just kind of wanted to see, how many of these guys could do 5 or more consecutive runs, and how many of them ended a run and then started a different run. So what you can see on here, and we're not going to go through all these players, but you can see the player, the consecutive number of years straight of top 12 fantasy points scored at the wide receiver position at an overall year finish, and when the run began and when it ended. Now, I also give the reason it ended, and I wanted to see if he ever returned to the top 12 after the run ended. And the following of consecutive seasons that he did return at, if he did return, is also there as well. And I also wanted to see the age when the run ended and the age when the second run started if they had a second run. So what you can see here, if you want to highlight Davante Adams, is that Davante Adams came in And he was an immediate great player basically after the first year of his rookie season. So what you don't see here is that Davante Adams had 2 top 12 seasons, non-consecutive in fantasy football, before he started this 4 consecutive season run between 2022 that just ended in 2024. But what we did see is 6 total Davante Adams top 12 seasons throughout his entire career. Now, if you want to look at the top 2 guys on this list over the last 11 seasons, what we see is that Antonio Brown, Hall of Famer, Julio Jones, possibly Hall of Famer, had 6 consecutive seasons as a top 12 guy. So he is right there at that peak number right here. And we have not seen a wide receiver come into his age range at 32 and start another run. So Davante Adams, there's a couple things working at his disadvantage if you can remember all that. He's 32 years old. If he started another run as a top 12 wide receiver, it would be breaking history. It would be a first. He's also the wide receiver 2 on his own team with some potential quarterback issues with Matt Stafford. So I do think that him being in the top 12 twice before the total run, bringing that number up to 6 total is probably going to be his cap. And I do think that where you're drafting him at on ESPN at 35.8 overall and on Yahoo 41.6 overall, I think it's a little bit too high. I think that there's too many things that could go wrong with this one. So I'm going to be off of Davante Adams in my redraft leagues. Now, getting to our next tier of guys right here, I do want to start out with Mr. Patrick Mahomes. And honestly, I don't get this one, guys. I got to be honest with you. After so many years of Patrick Mahomes not delivering the value at where you're taking him in these drafts, how can you still draft him this high? In ESPN, he's going 49.6 ADP off the board, and his ADP on Yahoo is 50.7. Like, this is just too high no matter where you slice this one. Because, again, if you look at his career, right, he obviously has the ability to be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football. I am not here to debate that as a Texas Tech Red Raider guns up. I love Patrick Mahomes. But Patrick Mahomes, in this range, there is way too many people that could get screwed by picking him in the 4th or 5th round. So when you look at Patrick Mahomes, right, what you see throughout his career is actually very comparable to Tom Brady's. Now, Tom Brady, what he did when he started was that he came out of the gate and was immediately great, right? He was showing off how great he was. Then there was that middle part of his career where he started to not be as productive in fantasy football. And then towards the end of Brady's career, that's when you started to see him still prove, yeah, I'm still a great player and I want to be dominant in fantasy again, right? Patrick Mahomes is entering that second part of his career, very similar to what Brady had, where he was, solid quarterback, but not a great quarterback, and definitely not where you should be taking him. So for me personally, obviously he's a great NFL quarterback. He's just less productive in fantasy. And when I look at Underdog again, this is another price that I think is way more reasonable. His Underdog price is 83 ADP. He's going around guys like Khalil Shakir, Jordan Mason, Josh Downs, TJ Hawkinson, Jalen Warren, Tyrone Tracy. I could make the argument for a lot of those guys and how they're good individual picks themselves. But Mahomes, if you want to take him, just go to Underdog, man. He has such a better value over there than what you could get him at in ESPN and Yahoo leagues. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is David Montgomery at number 7. And I do think that David Montgomery is a guy that I just can't draft. Like, I've been discussing Montgomery over the offseason, and there's really a couple points that I want to highlight here. So first of all, his ADP on ESPN is 67.9, and his ADP on Yahoo is 52.9. So this is a guy that you're getting basically in the 5th round of Yahoo drafts and the 6th round of ESPN drafts. Now, the big thing that I've always discussed this offseason with the departure of Ben Johnson is how is this new offensive coordinator, John Morton, going to step in and be able to maximize all of his players to the same level of Ben Johnson? I think if you think that about John Morton, you are underselling how great of an OC Ben Johnson was, because he was elite. But this guy, I just don't see being able to maximize all those same players. So I've always said this. I think it will go back to the big 3 in Detroit, which it will be Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam LaPorta. David Montgomery is not going to get maximized the same way as he did with Ben Johnson, because Ben Johnson has proven over years he's an elite two running back system type of guy that can provide top 15 upside for two different running backs. And this is also a guy who's getting older, and he's been more and more injured throughout his career. So you could basically almost count on David Montgomery missing a couple games at least. And I just think that when you factor in the age, like when does he slow down? I think it's this year. And factor in the different offensive coordinator, his price in these redraft leagues, man, it's just too high for me. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is also just, I think it's over with Cooper Kupp. I think you cannot justify to me taking Cooper Kupp, in my opinion. Like, Cooper Kupp is coming into the season as the wide receiver 2 in Seattle. That sounds like a decent proposition, right? And especially when you factor in that draft price. 92.7 ADP on ESPN and 113.7 ADP on Yahoo Leagues. Like, that price is not outrageous, right? Well, the problem that I'm having with Cooper Kupp that nobody wants to talk about is that the guy is 32 years old right now. That same age as Devontae Adams. And we have already seen the decline happen for Cooper Kupp. It's here. Like, it's over for Cooper Kupp. So it's purely simple for me. Like, when you're looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba and him, they're very similar player types. Well, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the superior player at this point to Cooper Kupp. And I think that when you factor in Kupp's injury history and his age, when you look at the other guys in his range, on ESPN particularly, Jacoby Myers, Tyrone Tracy, Matthew Golden, a much younger player with more upside in his offense. Deebo Samuel going like a round later. I think that those guys are just way too enticing, and I think I can't justify taking Cooper Kupp at this price, even though it's not priced too high. And the last guy in this tier at number 5 is going to be Terry McLaurin. Now, Terry McLaurin has an ADP of 40.9 on ESPN and an ADP of 42.4 on Yahoo. So the thing with Terry McLaurin that you have to remember is that he doesn't need the training camp time to learn the offense, right? This is a pro's pro. He's been with Washington his whole life, and he knows Cliff Kingsbury's system. What he needs that he's missing right now is to get his body ready for an NFL game. And he has not been doing that. So with this contract holdout, it's gone on way longer than I thought it would go on. And he has not practiced, and we are less than 2 weeks out from the NFL season starting. So with Terry McLaurin at this price, I can't justify it anymore. I think he needs to drop in drafts, and I think he will. But if you are drafting, let's say today, it's a Saturday when this video is coming out, I would not draft Terry McLaurin at this price right here on ESPN and Yahoo Drafts. Now, the next tier I want to go through, I've got Sam LaPorta at number 4. So obviously, the higher ranked these guys are, the least likely I am to take them in these redraft leagues. Sam LaPorta is like one of my least favorite picks in redraft leagues. 51.5 ADP on ESPN and 49.6 ADP on Yahoo. I hate this price for him. It doesn't really make much sense to me. Listen, I was just talking about Detroit and how I believe that without Ben Johnson, it will be relegated to the big 3. Sam LaPorta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs. And I do believe that. But this price for a tight end, you cannot make a mistake on this one. He has to hit for you or he will tank your team. You're talking about taking a tight end inside of a round 5 value right here. And you cannot convince me that he will be the main target outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams is there. And like I said, I just predicted all offseason that I believe it will be the big 3, and Sam LaPorta is in the big 3. But at the same time, if he was priced lower than this, this is more acceptable. But this price with him and what he gave us in fantasy last year, the production did not line up with this current draft price. You can get very similar production from the tight end position in the mid to late rounds. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. I can't cut this anyway and say to myself, yeah, I can actually see myself taking him there. This one just makes no sense to me. I've also got Travis Kelce at number 3, and I think that this one is so egregious as well. Like this one, again, with Patrick Mahomes, has slapped you in the face for 2 straight years now. It's over, guys. The difference between him and Mahomes is that Mahomes can still 100% be a number 1 quarterback in fantasy. That's why Mahomes is at 8 and Kelce's at 3. Because there is no possible way that Travis Kelce will return value for you where you're drafting him at. 64.3 ADP on ESPN and 61.9 ADP on Yahoo. Now, it is his lowest price in a long time. So I do want to just at least discuss the possibility, right? So let's say that Travis Kelce does what he did last year on a target basis, right? So last year he had 133 targets. That's a dominant tight end season for targets right there. But what we saw from Travis Kelce's play, and how you know it's over for him, is he had 8.5 yards per catch. That is the lowest he's ever had in his entire career, and it's because he can't move like he used to be able to. Now, you might say to me, well, that doesn't matter because he's a red zone threat, right? Well, let's look at last year. 3 total touchdowns. 3. That's just not good enough. And he was the tight end 6 last year. Now, that's where he's being drafted this year. But again, you have to remember that with Sam LaPorta, it also applies to Kelce as well. When you are drafting a tight end in these early rounds, you are not going to be able to get away with it if they're producing basically the same as a mid to late round tight end. And this is not what you're going to get with Kelce, is that McBride and Brock Bowers level play and George Kittle level play where you're drafting him at. He is not a discount, guys. This is over and done with. And last year, by the way, that season he had was without Rashee Rice for most of it, and with the rookie Xavier Worthy. Those two guys will develop this year and become way better and way more dominant and push Kelce out of the consecutive game plan on a weekly basis. This is so not worth it. I cannot justify picking Travis Kelce where he's going. But I will tell you this, I can justify Travis Kelce more at his cost than I can these top 2 guys. I will never, ever, ever take Quinshon Judkins at his current price. Now, to be fair to ESPN and Yahoo, I am not sure if they have updated their ADPs this week. But all I know is that last week we got news that Quinshon Judkins, the Cleveland Browns running back, not even, by the way, we'll get into that. Prosecutors declined to press charges on his domestic violence issue, right? So everybody went crazy. They wanted to start drafting him again, thinking that he was going to be the running back 1 for Cleveland right away. Well, as of a week later from that report coming out, he is still not signed with the team and has not joined the team for practice. This guy is going to need onboarding. When will they trust him to put him out there as their running back 1? It could be a long time, or it might not even happen at all this offseason. So after that news broke, right, his ADP rose back up to 107.6 on ESPN and 107.2 on Yahoo. Now, that was a 40-spot jump on ESPN alone. So again, I don't know where he's being drafted right now. Maybe he's falling a little bit. But to me, this is so outrageous. There is no way in hell that I would ever draft Quinshon Judkins at this price. To me, this is actually like a borderline waiver wire player. So where you're getting him in drafts, this is insanity. But I can say this, I like Quinshon Judkins' upside more. If he plays, then Tyreek Hill is at his current draft price. And I know that if you've been following me, you're well aware of Tyreek Hill and my issues with him. And if you're new, you've still been asking me, where is Tyreek Hill in your rankings? Where is he? He hasn't been into my top 30 rankings because I don't believe he will be a top 30 player this year in fantasy. Tyreek Hill, though, is being drafted as the 30th player off the board in ESPN ADP and the 35th player off the board in Yahoo ADP. This is friggin' crazy. Nobody's really heard my real issues with Tyreek Hill up to this point. So again, I want to go back to that spreadsheet I did with Davante Adams and highlight Tyreek Hill in that spreadsheet right there. So Tyreek Hill, if you go back to that spreadsheet I did with consecutive number of top 12 seasons from a wide receiver in fantasy, Tyreek Hill started his first run in 2017. Now, he had 2 seasons as a top 12 guy that got ended by a shortened season in 2019. Now, as you know, he did return to the top 12 for the last 4 seasons, and that gave him 6 total consecutive top 12 runs. And that run just ended in 2024 at the age of 30. So Tyreek Hill coming into the season at 31, if he were to go back into top 12 territory, which is where you're drafting him at, as a wide receiver right now, it would be unprecedented. Third run has never happened for any wide receiver on this list before. Tyreek Hill, there is nothing working in his favor. Because if you've been following the offseason, this offseason has been ridiculously awful for him too. It's like he's trying to talk his way out of Miami, and they want him gone too, but they can't find a trade partner because he's so expensive. This is a disgusting situation in Miami. I want nothing to do with it. I'm way more on Jalen Waddle as that wide receiver in Miami, and I cannot justify drafting Tyreek Hill unless he literally dropped to like the 7th or 8th round. So let me know who you think the most overvalued player is in 2025 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for 2025, click on this video right here.